I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Happy Monday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. My special guest tonight is Ron Placone. He's a comedian and the host of Get Your News On with Ron. Hi, Ron. Welcome back.
What's up, Sabby? Good to see you. Fun
Good to
times
see
hanging out
you
with you in
too.
Boston.
I know. For people who don't know, Ron Placone was here in Boston, had a show here. So that was my first time like seeing you do stand up in person. You're really funny.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks so much for coming. It was really cool to see everybody. It was awesome to meet you in Rome in person, and then Jill Stein was there. We did a song. That was a fun night. That was. I loved all the shows on that run, but if I had to give the gold star to one show, I gotta say that Boston was the most fun.
Oh, cool. Did you get to meet people in the other cities that you went to too? Like people that watch your show?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, we always do a meet and greet. I mean, yeah, like we always are hanging out after and stuff. So, I mean, that's like one of the coolest parts, especially when it's someone where it's like you recognize their handle from something and you've never, you have no idea what they look like in person. And then you meet them in person and they're like, yeah, I'm such and such. And it's always fun.
I know it's always cool to finally meet people because you
Yeah.
guys, to us, like we see you in the chat, but obviously we don't know what you look like most of the time. But Ron, you wanted to talk about something really interesting that's coming up. I'm going to go ahead and show this website to people, the Antitrust Summer.
Yeah.
So,
I'm having
what-
an antitrust summer right now. So, what's going on is there's two bills out there right now that are antitrust bills that Chuck Schumer promised to vote on the week of June 20th, and we really got to hold their feet to the fire and make them deliver on this vote, force them to have this vote because there's a lot of support for this. This bill was these bills were co-written by Amy Klobuchar and Chuck Grassley, so it was written by a Democrat and a Republican. And here's what these bills do. It's called OMA, the Open Apps Market Act, and ACOA, the American Innovations Choice Online Act. And what this does, so OMA, right now, app stores are dominated by Google and Apple. They're the big players on campus, and they charge alternative independent apps exorbitant fees and these high commission rates just to have their apps listed. And then
Right.
furthermore, they get to dictate what kind of software does or doesn't work on your device. This bill reins that in. It says, okay, you can't do that anymore. You need to give these apps a fair shot. You need to give them an open playing field because you have entirely too much market dominance here. A co-op. So when you do a search, like let's say I'm searching for a bag or whatever, and I do a search on, say, Google or Amazon in particular, what they will do is they will prioritize their own products and services over everyone else. A good example of this that they actually highlighted on John Oliver's show over the weekend. Say there's a popular bag that's a designer bag that a bunch of people like and they're buying it. Amazon will not only see that because of the data that they harvest off of you, but they're going to go and they're going to make a generic version of that bag, sell it for cheaper because again they've harvested all this data from you, the consumer. And then when you're searching for that bag, you're going to see all of Amazon's generic results in front of everything else. So it screws over all kinds of independent vendors and online vendors. This bill addresses that. It breaks that up. It stops Google and Amazon from doing that. Now, this
Right.
bleeds over into our world too, Sabby, because look, as content creators, we know how horrible it is to deal with YouTube. None of us like it. It's terrible. And, this bill starts breaking up these huge big tech juggernauts. Do these bills solve every issue we have in digital rights? Of course not. It doesn't get into data privacy. It doesn't get into issues of censorship or net neutrality. There's still all kinds of things we need in a digital bill of rights, which is my dream. But these two
Right.
bills are a huge initial step in breaking up big tech. And it really will, this will play a huge role in just the future of the internet. Because I mean, a
Right.
comparison that they made on the John Oliver show too that I thought was very interesting. Back in the day, AT&T had pretty much a monopoly on our phone service, and they had a monopoly on local calls and long distance calls. And then we broke that up. They did break that up. They enforced some antitrust legislation and broke that up. But what did that lead to? It led to answering machines. It led to way cheaper long distance calls. And it helped lead to the World Wide Web because it led to modems and stuff like that. So by not forcing this legislation and getting this legislation into law, I mean, we could really be threatening the future of the internet, where instead of having it be a democratizing, like landscape, like marketplace of ideas where everyone has a shot to put their stuff out there, which is what it's supposed to be, which is what made it cool in the first place. Well, instead of that, we're going to have a freaking, monopolistic surveillance hellscape, which is what it's descending into now. So please, I encourage everyone, go to antitrustsummer.com, sign this petition. That's antitrustsummer.com. We got to make them keep this promise, because guess what? Amazon and Google, they're spending a lot of money to stop
Yep.
these, a lot of money. And you know what else? Chuck Schumer, well, he's the guy who's in charge to put this bill on the floor. Hey, guess what? One of his daughters is an Amazon lobbyist. All right. So we got to be really, really freaking loud. Go to antitrustsummer.com. Don't let this fall by the wayside.
Yes, absolutely. Eric, could you put that link in the chat for this website? So it says here, big tech giants are violating our rights and undermining our democracy. And because they abuse their monopoly power to stifle competition, many of us don't have other choices. Fortunately, U.S. Congress has finally introduced legislation to put people back in control of tech. Tell your elected officials to pass antitrust reform legislation and stop big tech from dominating our lives. Yes, so I want to bring up what happened recently, because Jackson Hinkle was here Friday and he has just been kicked off of PayPal and Venmo. And again, those are apps. And I think this is another thing, because Amazon and Google can decide whether or not they're going to accept your app. Like, they don't accept every app. Like, people make apps all the time. They're not always accepted by Amazon and Google. So this is really important. I mean, we've been dealing with a lot of censorship as well, especially on YouTube, obviously, but we really need to break up big tech.
Big time. And, when you hear about someone getting kicked off of apps and stuff like that, that bleeds into an issue called cross-platform data sharing. Say it 5 times fast. You probably can't. Don't judge me. But cross-platform data sharing, which is basically where different apps, usually that are tied to big tech, they will just share information about whoever for whatever reason. And then they might decide, okay, you can't use our app anymore. One of the things that I covered on my show that went into this is a lot of times you see sex workers who are getting kicked off of DoorDash or getting kicked off of whatever it may be because they share this information on people. There's no reason for it. It shouldn't happen. And yeah, when you enforce antitrust and you enforce other apps to get a level playing field, that's gonna stop stuff like this. It's gonna hinder stuff like this from happening. Again, no single bill is going to address every single issue in the digital space we need to address. That's impossible. But these two bills are huge steps in antitrust legislation that we desperately need, and we have a chance at winning here. I mean, this is one of the things. Again, people across the political spectrum, we don't agree on all the solutions. But most people agree, even in the political realm, that, okay, these big tech giants have entirely too much power. They have way too much freaking power, and we got to do something about it. And this is antitrust legislation that, it really stops these basic monopolistic practices that any general person is going to be against, unless, of course, you're one of the lobbyists for Amazon or Google. So it
Yep.
has overwhelming support. It was written in a bipartisan manner, which 99% of the time, bipartisanship means they've both joined forces on a shitty idea. This is that 1% of the time where it's actually a good piece of policy. So for crying out loud, let's win this one, folks. Wins are so hard to freaking come by. We got a shot at winning this one. Please, it'll take you a minute and a half. Go to antitrustsummer.com. Let's try to get a win in the digital rights space. Because guess what? Here's the problem. They promised to vote the week of June 20th. If we don't get it, here's what's likely going to happen. What's likely going to happen, they're going to push it down by the wayside, and then Congress is going to go on vacation, which, let's be honest, they've earned it. They've worked very hard. They deserve a break, but they're going to go on vacation. And, and then they're going to come back and they're going to be like, we're so hyper-focused on the midterms now, we can't possibly look into legislation. And then they're going to push it by the wayside. We can't let them do that. We can't let them get away with that. So go to antitrustsummer.com.
Yes. And what Ron was saying about them sharing information, this is how some of those apps are able to kick people off. This is how they're able to kick off people like Caleb Maupin, Jackson Hinkle. They're after the gray zone now. This is how they can do that, because that's the question that comes up, right? Like people say, well, how do they even know what those individuals are talking about and what they're reporting on if they're not even like watching their content or reading like their journalism? And the way that they're able to do so is because they share information. So that's how they know, okay, this person is talking about Russia, Ukraine, not in the way that the establishment media is doing so. Let's kick them off of our platform. Venmo can say that. PayPal can say that. And so then there's the question of, can someone else create an app that's similar to what PayPal and Venmo has, but is not connected to big tech? And the problem that you're going to run into is, again, Google or Amazon have to approve it. Right.
Yeah. So it's like, A, yes, they have to approve it, like you said. And then B, if they do approve it, how is that app going to be able to compete with the way the fees work and stuff like that? They just won't be able to compete. And Amazon and Google know that. And looking further down the line, I think we would all like to see a day where we're not as dependent on YouTube. I sure as hell want to see that day. But, without some antitrust legislation, we're never going to freaking know. I don't mean to harp on this analogy too much, but I think it's a damn good one. You look at what would have happened if they never would have broken up AT&T. Think of all the advancements that happened largely because that maybe we wouldn't even have the World Wide Web. I think we probably still would have gotten it because the internet was still going on, but maybe not. Who knows? Yep. So it's like, this is incredibly important legislation, and it's incredibly attainable legislation. And so please go to antitrustsummer.com, sign the petition. We gotta really turn the volume up to 11.
Okay, let's play the video really quick. Let's see if we can. Oh, where did it go? Watch the video.
I think there's the video. So that it's a pretty long segment, but yeah, that's like the segment John Oliver did. That was it's a pretty good segment. They I don't agree with every single thing I've ever seen from that show, but on digital rights, they do a pretty good job. They did a great segment on net neutrality when we were fighting to get net neutrality, and they did a great segment here.
Okay, let's start here.
Not only do they play the typical computer games that all the kids enjoy, but their curiosity for learning has skyrocketed. Peter is constantly quoting sports statistics, and he can tell you the best surfing spots around the globe.
Not to mention the improvement in Peter's grades, and Dasha's too.
Okay, first, Peter was not checking surfing spots or sports statistics. Peter was masturbating. That is what Peter was doing. But also, spare a thought for Dasha there, who just gets also good grades. You deserve better, Dasha. I hope you grew up to be an early investor in cell phones, made millions of dollars, and never spoke to your weird family ever again. Specifically, we're going to talk about the fact that our experiences on the internet are now dominated by a very small handful of companies who are getting pretty used to throwing their weight around. In 2020, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust released a massive 450-page report detailing anti-competitive conduct by Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Alphabet. That's the parent company of Google. And the findings couldn't have been clearer.
I just want to jump in and say Alphabet Inc. We referred to them before when we're talking about candidates like donations, they're donors. There's a lot of so-called progressive politicians in DC that are funded by Alphabet Inc. So that includes Google and Amazon. And so that's interesting to know.
Each platform serves as a gatekeeper over a key channel of distribution, allowing these giants to pick winners and losers throughout our economy. And I know for some, that's part of the appeal.
Apple's the empire of the smartphone with all its attendant services. Facebook's the repository of your identity. Amazon's the online wall backed by cloud infrastructure, and Alphabet is all things search. Now, these companies have all created incredible products that we can't live without. They're gargantuan businesses that are, for the most part, loved and respected by the most important people, their customers. Are they monopolists? I honestly don't care. I don't. Wake me up when someone else can do it better.
Okay, so there's a few problems with that. First, in order to be woken up, at some point you do need to go to sleep. Something that I feel Jim Cramer, a man who constantly exudes big running late to my child's thing energy, hasn't done in the last decade. But second, a big thing these companies are accused of doing is suppressing their competition so completely that we never actually know if someone else could do it better because they'll never get a fair chance to try.
Okay, we'll go ahead and stop
I mean, that's a good summary. I mean, that's a really good summary. It's like, we'll never know if someone can do it better because you're prohibiting anybody from even having a shot at getting there.
Exactly. I think that's the problem. And I know this is one thing I will say I did agree with Elizabeth Warren on when she said we need to break up big tech because it's a problem. I mean, Google owns YouTube. Google is the largest search engine in the world. So other search engines like DuckDuckGo, they can't compete. Like they're there, but they're not going to be able to compete with Google per se. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. And this is why Rockfin, this is why Rumble, what's the other one? Rockfin, Rumble, Odyssey. This is why it doesn't mean that those platforms aren't good. They're just struggling to compete because Google pretty much dominates this space.
Yeah. And it also, I mean, it bleeds into the content world and it bleeds into like vendors and stuff, like people who are just selling their stuff online, which is every vendor that's out there now. How do you not sell your stuff online? And you just have this gross disadvantage because Amazon will just, copy your products and then offer it cheaper. It's a total scam and it's a total ripoff. And actually, it's funny. Amazon sent this letter out to their vendors, or out to not their vendors, but like vendors who were on Amazon, which is like basically everyone. And they're saying, oh, yeah, you should oppose this legislation. And people wrote them back. They were like, screw you. Like we're suffering because of what you do. We support this legislation. Are you kidding me? You guys need to be broken up. So yeah, antitrustsummer.com, folks.
I think there's a question for you on Rockfin, Ron. Can we go ahead and add that to the screen, Eric? Thanks for the tip, Roger Meadows on Rockfin. Hey, Ron, you forgot to answer my question on Heartland's Media. Does Senator Kay Gillis support and sponsor the antitrust bill?
I don't know every single senator off the top of my head, to tell you the truth, but I think if you sign the petition, it will go straight to your representatives. You just sign the petition, you put your zip code in, and it goes straight to your people. So, you'll definitely find out. I can't speak for every single sitting person in Congress or the Senate off the top of my head. But I do know that there is a large portion of people who have promised to vote in favor of this. Like, they're pretty confident they do have the 60 votes in the Senate. They're pretty confident it would get through the House too. That's what they've said. That's what they've promised. So I say, let's call their frickin' bluff and hold them to account. Because if we don't call their their bluff, they'll just be like, oh, well, we thought we had the votes, but now we're busy. No, you're not going to get that.
Well, I'm going to pay close attention to this because So they're counting Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin too. And the reason why I asked that question is because I'm sure you heard about the Bilderberg meeting that just happened last week. Kirsten Sinema was at that meeting, which is interesting because she doesn't hold a leadership position in DC, but for some reason she was there, probably a lot of her donors, but big tech was there too.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see if she actually votes in favor of this. And if she doesn't, then all of you watching, you'll know why she doesn't. Because like I said, like she was there with them. So this will be interesting to see which way this goes. And then what could this mean for the future? Like if this does pass, what does this mean? Like, will Google still own YouTube, you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, this bill, it doesn't necessarily say that these companies can't continue to do the types of things they do. In fact, that's what they're doing to try to scare people. Amazon is saying, well, you like Prime, don't you? You might not have Prime anymore if this passes. Hey, you like your Google Maps, right? You know, and look, I'll admit I have a terrible sense of direction. I use Google Maps all the time. This does not infringe on their ability to have those things. This is not, I mean, Amazon can still offer Prime if they want to. Google can still have Google Maps. This does not stop any of that. What this stops is it stops their monopolistic practices that gives them this gross advantage over everybody else. And when you stop that and when you force them to compete on a level playing field, who knows what could happen in the future? I mean, Google can still be fine if they want to be. They just can't be the predatory juggernaut they are now. Same with Amazon. And you're going to see what the future may hold. Maybe there's a better Amazon out there. Maybe there's a better Google out there that won't become some kind of crazy monopoly. And instead it'll kind of be specialized. You know what I mean? So that's what this legislation does. Does it address every digital rights issue that's out there? Absolutely not. No single piece of legislation will. But this is huge antitrust legislation that does have a wide array of support from both Republicans and Democrats, people who, a lot of people who I don't usually agree on with a lot of things. But in this case, we all agree these big tech juggernauts have way too much freaking power, and we got to rein this in.
Yeah. And I want to say for people who are, hesitant to try out new platforms, I know some of you told me you don't like Rockfin because you don't like the way it's configured. And I get that. If you're looking for something that's close to what YouTube has, I highly recommend, and I'm going to share this with you guys here. The closest platform I've seen to what YouTube has is Odyssey. And Ron, I don't know if are you on Odyssey?
Yes.
It's Odyssey. They pretty much, their format is somewhat similar in reference to how their videos are laid out. Same thing with the titles, the descriptions. It's very similar to what YouTube has. So I would recommend, if you want to try something different, to check out Odyssey if you still want that YouTube feel, but you don't want to support YouTube per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, it's totally great to support alternative platforms, and it's great to see them, be able to kind of hang in there. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, we really have to break up these big tech. I mean, they're near monopolies, and we know it. And also with the way Wall Street works, Wall Street is always going for the next billion and bust. So if they don't have something that overtakes Facebook or overtakes YouTube, well, then they're just like, okay, we failed, so we're just going to pull the runway from it. And that's just what we're faced with. So it's like, we need antitrust legislation. So please, again, antitrustsummer.com, please sign, please, please, please.
And when are they? Do you know when they're going to vote on this, Ron?
Well, their promise, the promise is the week of June 20th. That's the promise, but we got to hold them to it. Because again, Chuck Schumer, he's got a daughter who's an Amazon lobbyist. So we got to hold them to this promise. Because if we're quiet and they think they could probably get away with sleeping on it, there's a good chance they're going to. But if we're so freaking loud that they can't, that they kind of have to give us this win, well, that's what's going to happen. So please, 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 please sign.
Yeah, I also want to add, I don't know if you know this, wrong, but Chuck Schumer's cousin is Amy Schumer.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, he's got connections all over the place. All over the place. Guys, definitely sign and share this. Eric, can you put the link in the chat one more time? Because we need as many people to sign this as possible. Like, something has to change in reference to tech. I don't know if you saw this recently, Ron, but I did see on Twitter, it was earlier this morning. Did you see what's happening with the gray zone? What Max Blumenthal said they're coming after them now in reference to like removing them.
They had a problem on YouTube, right?
And now they have a problem on Apple.
Like, you mean the podcast? Like the Apple podcast? Yeah, see, I mean, again, I mean, this is, you need antitrust legislation. You know, I mean, what if we saw a future where people's just websites were like sustainable enough? Where, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, and I know people are, I know sometimes it's really hard to imagine because right now the reality is there is no substitute for YouTube. There is no substitute for, like, if you have a podcast and you're not listed on Apple Podcasts, good freaking, I mean, that's hard. Like that's crazy. And so, you know, but without antitrust legislation, we're not even going to start to build the internet of tomorrow. And it's like, you know, what do you want from your internet? Do you want the internet to be what it started as, what made it cool in the first place? Or do you want it to be this totally homogenized capitalist surveillance hellscape? Because that's what it's turning into. And I know people like, I mean, you know, I've kind of been on the digital rights beat for a really, really long time. And I remember when people told me no one gives a shit about net neutrality. It's boring. Then guess what? We lost it. And it wasn't so boring anymore all of a sudden. Look, the internet is just another medium. If we don't fight for it, we're going to freaking lose it. And there's plenty of powerful people that want to take it. So, yes. You know, antitrustsummer.com, please.
Yes, guys, please sign that if you can. And then another thing I was going to ask you about, Ron, in reference to your show, because you mentioned website, and that was something like Lee Camp came on here a while back, and he said he tried to do this as well, where people could just like watch his show through his website. I wish that was more popular. I wish more people were doing that. Like people that have websites could do that.
It's hard. I mean, that's really hard unless you already have like, I guess like if you have a really huge following. I mean, there's some people like they're able to get decent apps for their podcast that work and stuff. And then a lot of people will just follow it that way. You know, but again, you need, you know, permission from the overlords to have your app listed and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I would love a future where that's, you know, kind of the lay of the land. I mean, I feel like the internet sort of started out that way. Like before, it was like you always went to someone's website. And then, of course, we had like the MySpace reign where like, and I think that was sort of the start of like websites not being as big of a thing because you would just go to somebody's MySpace. And I will argue with anybody that all things aside, MySpace was the coolest social media platform. We didn't know what we had until it was gone because I feel like MySpace was, I mean, especially like as a performer or a content creator, you could have videos, you could have audio, you could list your tour dates, you could have a blog. Like MySpace, we took it for granted, folks. We took it for granted. But I mean, you know, they sold it and ruined it. But yeah. So I would love to see the internet kind of, you know, go back to the more kind of level playing field, crazy super information highway that it started as, or at the very least, not get any worse.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, MySpace like lost out to Facebook, which I would argue, I don't think Facebook is all that great, to be honest.
No, I think Facebook is so boring. I mean, I don't really like any of them that much. I use them because they are necessary. I mean, you need them to get your message out. If I had to pick a favorite, I'd pick Twitter. I think Twitter is kind of the most, I mean, I don't want to say it's fun, but it's like closer to fun than the rest of them. I feel like Facebook is just such a cesspool of just like all the people who you're trying to avoid from high school. It's where they all just gather and express their shitty points of view. And it's just like, oh, geez. But Twitter is a little more like, I don't know. It's like just a little more kind of out in the open and just sort of like everyone's just sort of, you only have 280 characters. So you got to kind of keep it on focus a little bit. But yeah, I like Twitter better. But I mean, I'm not like, I don't like love any of them.
Awesome. All right, Ron, thanks so much for stopping by. Before you head out, where can people find you and how can people support your work?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at you can find me on all the platforms at Ron Placone. And Twitter's the one I'm most active on at Ron Placone, YouTube Ron Placone, pointed the wrong YouTube Ron Placone, Rockfin Ron Placone, RonPlacone.com, where I got tour dates. I'm going to be in Iceland at the end of the month for the Reykjavik Fringe Festival. So if there's any Iceland listeners, come out to Reykjavik for the Fringe, and I'm going to be there June 28th and June 30th. Then I'll be in the Pacific Northwest with Graham Elwood July 28th, Portland, Oregon, July 29th, Seattle, Washington, and July 30th, Vancouver, British Columbia. Kind of did the corners so we could focus on Canada this year. And Midwest folks, I know we're not really, I'm not really hitting the Midwest much this year, but I will be hitting the Midwest next year. But in the meantime, yeah, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, Iceland, RonPlacone.com. And AntitrustSummer.com. Sign, please. Let's break up big tech.
Awesome. Busy schedule, Ron. Busy schedule.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for covering this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for coming on. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye. All right, guys. Yes, definitely sign that website. That is incredibly important. We got to make some changes here, even if they're small ones. They're steps to the road for progress. All right, guys, what are we talking about tonight? I have some great stories. I also have some great news to share with you later on as well. All right, so tonight we're discussing, so Ron Placone was just here to talk about Antitrust Summer. We're also going to discuss Cornel West Schools Bill Maher. I have so much to say about that conversation. And we're going to discuss AOC defends Biden. So that's an interesting interview as well. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. I'm going to go ahead and share here. Thank you, Sabby patrons. If you're interested and you want to be a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and Ultimate. All of their names are listed here. I really do appreciate all of your support. Thank you guys so much. And I want to give a quick shout out to a new Sabby patron, Felipe Emilio Franco. What a beautiful name. Thank you so much. Their names are also scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So let's go ahead and get into our first story. So I want to get started with this AOC defends Joe Biden story. So I want to give a quick shout out to Case Study QB for doing great work as usual. This interview was pretty interesting to me. So for those who have not seen this, AOC made an appearance on CNN. Thank you for this Case Study QB. And they start to ask her questions about whether or not she would support Joe Biden. And I want you to pay close attention to the way that she answers this question and the host response as well, because I just feel like this is very telling. But I don't want you to fall for the okie doke. So let's listen to this really quick.
This week, you endorsed progressive New York State Senator Alessandra Biaggi. She's trying to unseat your Democratic colleague, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney. Here's what President Obama's former campaign manager, Jim Messina, said about that. He said, "This is counterproductive. The Supreme Court is about to outlaw abortion. We could lose both houses. So we are going to focus our time running against each other. Now we're primary and committed progressives because why? If we lose the House, it's because of dumb stuff like this." What do you say to him?
Whoops, I think that's the wrong video. Sorry about that, guys. This is what happens when you're live. It can happen. Okay, now I have the right one. Here we go. All right, again, this is AOC being questioned about whether or not she would endorse Joe Biden come 2024. So let's listen to this.
Before we go, I just want to ask.
Meh. I want to comment here first for a second because I'm noticing something. Look at AOC's facial expression. She has this look on her face like, she doesn't look comfortable. She doesn't look comfortable. But let's go ahead and listen to her response to this.
Before we go, I just want to ask about President Biden. He is saying he's going to run again in 2024. Will you support him?
You know, if the president chooses to run again in 2024, I mean, first of all, I'm focused on winning this majority right now and preserving a majority this year in 2022. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think if the president has a vision, then that's something certainly we're all willing to entertain and examine when the time comes.
That's not a yes.
Yeah, you know, I think we should endorse when we get to it. But I believe that the president has been doing a very good job so far. And, you know, should he run again, I think that I think it's we'll take a look at it.
Okay.
But right now we need to focus on winning a majority instead of a presidential election.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Before we go, I just want to ask about President Biden.
All right, let's break this apart here. There's a couple of things I want to point out. Listen to this. I do want to remind you also, this is the same CNN host. When Bernie Sanders won Nevada, this is the same CNN host that was afraid. When she announced it, she was like, it goes to Bernie Sanders. And she had this fearful look on her face. This woman's an actress. But obviously, she was trying to get a yes or no answer from AOC. And she didn't get that. She didn't get that. Now, does that mean that AOC is necessarily doing the people's work here? No, not necessarily. And I'm going to point to a couple of inconsistencies in this video. So let's start here.
He is saying he's going to run again in 2024. Will you support him?
You know, if the president chooses to run again in 2024, I mean, first of all, I'm focused.
Let's start with that part right there. Notice how she changed the conversation. AOC did. So she asked her if the president, you know, Joe Biden's running 2024, would you endorse him? AOC starts out with, you know, if the president runs in 2024, actually, first of all, I'm focused with, she changed the conversation. This was her way to not answer that question. Let me talk about what I'm actually focused on right now so that I don't really have to answer your question. She didn't want to give a yes or a no. And I would be willing to bet if maybe AOC knows, she could, I don't know. Maybe AOC knows that it could be possible that Joe Biden is deciding not to run 2024. Maybe AOC knows that somebody else is planning on challenging Joe Biden. Because to me, that would explain why she wouldn't give an answer. She wouldn't give a yes or a no. So maybe she knows that somebody has said that they would like to challenge. And I'm not talking about Bernie Sanders because Bernie said he would only do it if Joe Biden didn't run. So maybe she knows that somebody else is thinking about primarying Joe Biden from the left. And that is why she doesn't want to give an answer. Look at the look on her face. She looks so nervous. She looks so uncomfortable. That's a yes or no question. Let's continue.
On winning this majority right now and preserving a majority this year in 2022. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think if the president has a vision, then that's something certainly we're all willing to entertain and examine when the time comes.
That part right there. So she's focusing on the midterms right now. Okay. She goes on to say, if the president has a vision, then that's something that we'll entertain later down the road. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. What does that tell you about AOC? See, here's the trick. She's supposed to be the progressive. Progressives didn't want Joe Biden there to begin with. They wanted Bernie Sanders, right? So if she says, yes, I will endorse Joe Biden for 2024, then she looks suspect to her progressive fans, the people who really support AOC and really believe in this progressive movement. If she says no, then she looks suspect to Democrat establishment. She looks suspect to Nancy Pelosi, to Chuck Schumer, to the Democrat Party leadership that is in Congress. So what she's choosing to do is to not say yes or no. She's done this before, actually, if you've been paying attention. The vote on the Iron Dome. She decided to vote present so that she wouldn't look bad on either side, so that she could say, well, I didn't vote yes and I didn't vote no, so don't look at me. Let's carry on.
That's not a yes.
Pay attention to that part right there. The CNN host goes, that's not a yes. That right there lets you know that when you come onto that platform as someone who is a Congress member, if they ask you if you are going to endorse Joe Biden, they want you to say yes. They don't want to hear a no. Pay attention to what she said. She said, that's not a yes. She did not say that's not a yes or a no. You guys hear that? You catch it? Let's go back in.
Yeah, I think we should endorse when we get to it. But I believe that the president has been. When we get to it, but I believe that the president has been doing a very good job.
That part right there. Yeah, I know we should endorse when we get to it. I believe the president has been doing a great job. See, if I were the host, I would come back and ask AOC, and she does not do this, by the way. I would come back and ask her, if you believe that the president's doing a great job, then why won't you endorse him for 2024? Boom. Just like that. She doesn't ask her that. If you say that he's doing a great job, then why won't you say, yes, you will endorse him? If he's doing such a great job, why would you hold back on that? Anybody else catch that? Let's go on.
So far, and should he run again? I think that I think it's. We'll take a look at it.
Okay.
I want you to pay attention to something that she just said, and I don't know if everyone who's reported on this story caught this part. Pay attention to what she says right about here.
And I think that I think it's. We'll take a look at it.
Okay.
But right now, we need to focus on winning a majority. Should he run again? I think that I believe that the president has been doing a very good job so far, and should he run again? I think that.
That part right there. Should he run again? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, ladies and gentlemen, but didn't Joe Biden already say that he's running? Didn't Joe Biden already publicly say that he is running again in 2024? I think we all heard that, right? AOC's right there in DC, so I'm sure she's heard that too. So why is AOC saying, should the president run again? If he already told you that he's going to run in 2024, which he announced that to everyone, why is she giving some type of doubt that he's going to run again? Maybe she knows something that we don't. Maybe she doesn't believe what he's saying, that he's going to run again. This is why I think it's important. I like to break down these clips. Like when I see people have these interviews on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, I like to break down those interviews because they happen so fast and you can't hit rewind some of the times, depending on what type of TV you have. You have a smart TV, you can't hit rewind. So there's things that can get lost in translation. There's things that you can miss. Now, I want to point out something else again that she said from the very beginning. The woman told you, the commentator told you, that's not a yes. So let's put the pieces together here. Again, she wouldn't tell you yes or no if she was going to endorse Joe Biden. The commentator told her that's not a yes, letting you know that as a Democrat congressperson, they expect when you come on CNN, they want you to say yes. So AOC is playing in the middle and not saying yes or no. She's protecting herself and she's trying to protect her brand because, like I said, if she says yes, that doesn't make her look good to the progressive base. If she says no, then she's going to have to deal with Democrat leadership in Congress, right? Then she goes on to say, should the president run again? She's giving some type of idea to you that there's a possibility that that may not happen. These are things we need to pay attention to. These are things we need to pay attention to. Now, she went on to say that he's doing a great job. Like I said, if you're the host, if she's doing a great job, as the host, you should come back and ask her, well, if he's doing a great job, why won't you endorse him? That's what you do. That's how you handle that. But is he doing a great job? I don't think so. Let's look at some receipts. Let's look at how well Joe Biden is supposedly doing right now. Now, again, this is from CNN. Let's hear about Joe Biden's performance so far. See if I can scroll down here, make this a little bigger for you guys. Let's hear about his performance. I don't know what happened to the arrow here. I don't know why it keeps disappearing. Okay.
Performance and much more. Let's get right to CNN political director David Chalian. David, two things sure stand out in this new poll. One, the economy, a top priority. And two, Americans disapprove of President Biden's handling of this more than ever before.
Yeah, and those two things together spell a tough political environment for Democrats, the president and his party. Take a look here. Most important issue, it's by far, Jake, 50% of people in this poll say the economy is the most important issue facing the country.
I want you guys to pay close attention to every item that's on this list, and I'm going to point out something to you. The number one issue, obviously, is the economy. Obviously.
Russia-Ukraine war at 14%, immigration at 10%, everything else in single digits. We should note this poll was completed just before that bombshell news from the Supreme Court on abortion. Biden's handling of that number one issue only at a...
Okay, let's go back to this chart for a second, because there's something about these items. Okay. Number one is the economy. Two is Russia-Ukraine war. That's 14%. Third is immigration, which is 10%. Climate change is 9%. Racial injustice is 5%. Coronavirus is 5%. Education is 4%. Education's at the bottom of the list. There was something that really stood out to me about this poll when I looked at all of these items: economy, the war, immigration, climate change, racial injustice, the pandemic, education. Where's healthcare? Not on the list. I find that suspect. I find it to be strange that the pandemic made it on this list, but healthcare is not on this list. How is that possible? Do we believe this? Really? Who was polled? This poll was conducted April 28th through May 1st. April 28th through May 1st. Who did they poll? They don't tell you. Something about this is strange. You mean to tell me? I find it hard to believe that the economy is only 50%. I would expect that to be higher. Not sure about that. Climate change, 9%. Really? Who'd you poll? I guarantee you they did not poll people under the age of 35. This is very odd. And the reason why I say that age group in particular, why is education at the bottom? If you're already done with education, your kids are already done with education, it may not be that important to you. You get where I'm coming from? They probably polled people 65 and up. I don't see anything on here about student loan debt. Really? Who they poll? So this was very strange to me. This was very strange. Let's go back in because he goes on to more issues.
Anything else in single digits? We should note this poll was completed just before that bombshell news from the Supreme Court on abortion. Biden's handling of that number one issue only at a 34% approval rating on the economy, 66% disapprove, and that.
Okay, this goes back to what I was talking about. If 34% approve of how Joe Biden is handling the economy, this particular question, 66% disapprove of how Joe Biden is handling the economy. If 66% of people disapprove of how he's handling the economy, how is it that only 50% said that the economy was the number one issue? I find that hard to believe. I find that a little, it just doesn't sit well with me. It does not sit well. Let's go back in.
That number there, Jake, that's been going down since our poll earlier this year. He was at 37% approval on the economy. Now he's down to 34%. And in terms of Biden's policies, look at this. A majority of Americans in this poll, 55%, say Biden's policies have actually worsened economic conditions. 26% no effect. Only 19% of Americans in this poll say Biden's policies have improved conditions, Jake.
Okay, so here we go again. If you look at this, and again, this is all in reference to the economy. How have Biden's policies affected U.S. economic conditions? 55% says worsened conditions. 26% said had no effect. That's probably people who have money. Improved conditions is also 19%. That's probably also people that have money. Who did they poll? You see what I'm saying? I find it hard to believe that worsened conditions is only 55%. Let's go on.
And David, because of the economy, more Americans say they are buying less, according to the poll.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. The economy is how people feel it in their everyday lives. Look at this. 63% of respondents say they're buying fewer groceries. Same say they've cut non-essentials out of their lives. 55%, a majority, delaying purchases. 54% cutting back on driving. You can see how Americans, majority of Americans, have changed the way they operate day to day because of inflation.
Did you guys notice something? Watch how he covers these items one more time. I'm gonna break them down for you, and then I want to show you what he forgot to mention. The first one, due to recent economic conditions, 63% have said they are buying fewer groceries. That does not surprise me. 63% said they've cut non-essentials. That also doesn't surprise me. 55% said delayed purchases. 54% said cut back on driving. By the way, I'm one of those people. The gas is too high. And then there's this one right here, which he did not mention. 33% lack of affordable housing. Again, I question the poll because 33% lack of affordable housing, I'd argue it's higher than that. It's higher than that. They're polling people that already own their own homes. They don't have to make mortgage payments anymore. That's the bulk of the people they're polling here. Notice how he skips that bottom item. Watch it again. Here we go.
Last, according to the poll.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. The economy is how people feel it in their everyday lives. Look at this. 63% of respondents say they're buying fewer groceries. Same say they've cut non-essentials out of their lives. 55%, a majority, delaying purchases. 54% cutting back on driving. You can see how Americans, majority of Americans, have changed the way they operate day to day because of inflation.
Okay. Is it just me, or did anyone notice he named every item on that list, but when it came to lack of affordable housing, he didn't say that one. He left that one out. I wonder why. I wonder why he would not mention that one. And I don't care if it's just because it's at the bottom of the list. He went through every single one of them and did not say that one. Because that's been a problem before inflation. That was already an existing problem. That was already an existing issue.
What about the president's overall job performance? Where does he stand there?
Yeah, I mean, these economic numbers are keeping his approval rating where it's been, which is a low 40s here. 41% approval in our poll, 59% disapproval. And Jake, look at how that 41% stacks up among his modern era predecessors at this point in their presidency. Joe.
So I would even argue that 41% is also high. I think it's actually lower than that. 41% approve how he's handling it overall, 59% disapprove.
Low 40s here, 41% approval in our poll, 59% disapproval. And Jake, look at how that 41% stacks up among his modern era predecessors at this point in their presidency. Joe Biden's down here at the bottom of the heap with Donald Trump and Jimmy Carter, two one-term presidents, where his...
Nope, that's not a good sign for Joe Biden. I want you to notice something here about this presidential approval rating. In 2002, George W. Bush had a 77% approval rating. Now, that did decline. That did decline when he went into his second term. 1962, JFK had a 71% approval rating. 1990, George Bush Sr., 65% approval rating. I think this is 54. I can't see that one. Nah, shoot. Anyway, 60% approval rating. I can't see the text on that one for some reason. 1970, Nixon had a 59% approval rating. How you let Nixon beat you, bro? We go over here to Bill Clinton. 1994 had a 51% approval rating. Obama had a 51% approval rating in, I think that's 2010. I can't see part of it. Sorry. Ronald Reagan had a 45% approval rating. Jimmy Carter, 41%, Trump, 41%, and Joe Biden, 41%. And the commentator here is correct. Every single one of the 41% approval ratings for president were one-term presidents. Every single one of them. Jimmy Carter, Donald Trump. Joe Biden's next in line, bro. Joe Biden is next in line.
His approval rating is right now at this point in the presidency, Jake?
Well. But according to AOC, Joe Biden's doing a great job. I don't know how people can fake this. I really don't know how people can just sit here and continue to lie to the American people. I don't understand it. I'm going to go to some of these super chats really quick. Thank you for the super sticker, Venetia David. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. I've been increasingly ignoring AOC and her no squad. They effectively are like regular Democrats in their support nice things and say morally right things, chatter, since they haven't really leveraged their political positions. Thank you so much for that. Well said. Prep the polish. She is such a fraud. A couple of days ago, she comes out and admits Congress is corrupt on both sides. Boom, bingo. And today says Joe Biden is doing a great job. 100%, right? Carl says she will do exactly what the neo-lib DNC death cult leadership will tell her to do. She will not disobey Mama Bear. Thanks so much for the super chat, AJF. We need leftist politicians that exhibit these firebrand traits: revolutionary, rabble-rouser, soapbox orator, incendiary, subversive. AOC ain't it. Bam. Thank you for this super chat as well. Notice when national media displays polls, they never lay out the demographics typically. Thank you. Exactly. That's gaslighting, misleading the masses by omission, folks. Yeah. They don't poll me, that's for sure. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Polls are just used to manufacture consent. They are easy to manipulate, not only over polling a specific demographic, but how the questions are worded can drastically impact the results. You're right. You're right about that. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Some of my coworkers have resorted to biking miles to get to work and back so they don't have to pay $75 for gas. We are making $13 to $15 an hour. That's right. That's right. I actually told, my previous employer one day, I told them, I was like, yeah, I can't afford to drive back and forth there right now. I just can't afford it. They wanted us to come back to work for an event that evening. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I can't afford it. It's just a reality. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Don't know why, but just about every poll since 2016 has had a liberal bias. And for the AOC thing, this is why I don't grade on a curve. And thank you for this super chat as well. Invite Richard Wolff to talk inflation, please. Yes. Yes. I think we're trying to schedule something. It'll have to be in the future. But I think I'm trying to schedule something for that with Richard Wolff. He's been on here before. Like, Richard Wolff is awesome. He's awesome. He's amazing. So much education you can learn from him. Okay. Cornel West made an appearance on Bill Maher's show recently. I can't wait to get into this discussion, I got to tell you. And Bill Maher, some people call him progressive. I call him a liberal. I'm just going to keep it real. I felt Bill Maher was trying to make excuses for Joe Biden. A lot of liberals are doing that. And Cornel West, I feel, really educated Bill Maher in this situation. So there's two clips. The first one that I'm going to show you shows all the excuses that Bill Maher is making for Joe Biden. And there's certain things I want to point out in this conversation that I think are important. First and foremost, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Election here. And the person who got the most votes, it's a Democratic primary, but it's going to be a Democratic winner in the fall. Okay. Right. So it was this guy, Rick Caruso, white guy, billionaire, and Karen Bass. I know them both, like them both. Mm-hmm. She's a black congressperson. Sure. He beat her by 30 points with black men. What's up with that?
So I just want to jump in here and let you know they're talking about the LA mayor race, at least in this part of the discussion. Rick Caruso, he's not a politician. He's a billionaire, I believe. I have to double check that. I believe he is a billionaire, and he was a Republican and switched to a Democrat. And apparently he's polling higher than his challenger. I'll go into a little bit more about this tomorrow when Jimmy comes on. But he's polling higher than his challenger and apparently is polling pretty well with black men. And I do want to add this part here for people who are not aware. Caruso has been endorsed by Snoop. He's also been endorsed by Gwyneth Paltrow. So I think this is where like that celebrity support can come in, right? Like if you're a fan of Snoop and you love Snoop and Snoop says, I'm riding with Caruso, I'm going to vote for Caruso, he has my endorsement. Well, then if you're not really paying attention to politics like a lot of us do, if you're not really getting deep into this, it's easy for someone who's a fan of Snoop to say, oh, well, Snoop's backing Caruso, so I'm going to back Caruso too. This, I think, is sometimes one of the dangers about celebrity endorsements, because celebrities have fans. And so if their fans are going to support them and they tell them you should vote for this person, it's easy for them to do that. So let's go back into the video.
You know, it's hard to say though, man. My dear brother Mark Ridley Thomas, who I love like a brother who's been mistreated in so many different ways, that when I saw what Caruso did in his ad, I had real critique of that. And so that I have a certain suspicion of certain politicians who come flying in from the top with billionaire money and think somehow they're going to be messianic in terms of dealing with the mess that sometimes they actually help cause. Now, I'm not saying that in his case, but if I looked a little deeper, I might see some connections. So in that sense,
So I like the fact that Cornel West brings up the money. And this is what I feel is missing from a lot of these interviews sometimes. Like people who are leftists and progressives, they won't bring up the money issue. So that's one thing I really liked about this discussion. He was like, we need to talk about the billionaire, the money that comes in. Now watch Bill Maher make excuses.
In politics before this.
No, and I know, but that's what it is. As you know, I mean, the organized greed has such an impact on our electoral political system that it makes it so truncated. We got a choice between neo-fascists like Brother Trump or milquetoast neoliberals like Brother Biden. Wow, well, I'm so happy to make a world-shaking decision. You know what I mean? And you think of all the decent people in America, all the decent people in the country. How do we end up so hemorrhaged with these mediocre folks?
So he lets you know right then and there, and I'm glad he said this to Bill Maher of all people, that at the end of the day, there really is no lesser to evil. Both of those options are horrible. Both of them are horrible. And if people don't feel excited about voting for you, then what does that say about you as a person? What does that say about your campaign? What does that say about your candidacy?
I see Biden, but I see Biden is down with his black folks. Can I just read? I said I've looked into this. Here's some of the things he's done.
Sure.
Here he comes. Here comes Bill Maher, here to rescue and defend Joe Biden. And I want you to pay close attention to all the items that he mentions, because I'm going to debunk them. Here we go.
One of the most diverse cabinets in history. First, of course, black and female vice president. Directed federal agencies on the first day to address the impacts of systemic racism. Extended the eviction moratorium that disproportionately helped black families remain safe during COVID. Executive order to improve educational opportunities.
Let's go through these, shall we? You know what was interesting to me is that Bill Maher did what liberals tend to do. He led with identity politics. The very first item that he mentioned on this list appointed one of the most diverse cabinets in history. Because that's how a lot of liberals think in this country. They lead with that. They lead with identity politics because they don't have anything else to go off of, because he hasn't really done anything. He hasn't really improved things for people in this country. That's why people are still mad about the economic situation that they have right now. So the first thing he does, leading with identity politics. The second item, identity politics. First Black, Asian American, and female vice president. Now, to those of you who support this, who think that it's okay to lead with identity politics and that's all we should be thankful for and happy for, I ask you this question. What do those two items actually do for the American people? How does having the first Black, Asian American, and female vice president, how does that help people right now? when gas is expensive? How does that help people right now when there's a baby formula shortage in this country? How does that help people right now who are just boggled down with mounds of student loan debt? How does that help people right now that don't know how they're going to pay their rent next month? Because these landlords are still increasing the rent, even though they said that they wouldn't. They're still increasing it, but our pay hasn't increased. How does that actually help people? What does that do for the American people? Economically, not a damn thing. It's just virtue signaling. That's all this is. And he led with it. Bill Maher walked right into the liberal trap. Let me lead with the black this and the black and the woman that. And that's what a lot of liberals do. The next item, directed federal agencies to address the impacts of systemic racism on black communities and advance racial equity. What do you need to address? The research has already been done. The data has already been given. This is one of those things I see politicians do. They create a committee to address something. They create a committee to let's do the research when the research has already been done, instead of actually fixing the issue. You can already knock off 1, 2, and 3 off this list when we're talking about what has Joe Biden really done for minorities, because making a committee to address something doesn't mean anything when the research is already done, the data is already there, and you're not actually doing anything to improve people's conditions in the community. You're not funding these schools. You're not improving transportation services. You're not paying people more. Your committee to address systemic racism isn't helping. It's not doing anything. Extended the eviction moratorium that disproportionately helped black families remain in safe housing during the pandemic. At the same time that he kicked people off unemployment. What? He only extended the eviction moratorium because there was pressure put on him to do so. Because there were activists. And because the squad did that whole theatrics event at the Capitol, which they got approval to do so. That's the only reason why it was extended. The last one, executive order to improve educational opportunities for black people. What educational opportunities? What were they? That could mean anything. What do you mean? I'm looking at the K through 12 system as someone who's an educator. You're looking at K through 12. These schools haven't been improved. School funding comes from property taxes. So if you're living in these poor, low-income neighborhoods, the school funding has not increased. So what are the educational opportunities, Bill? Break them down. Let's go on. He gives another list.
For black people. Barred the use of chokeholds. DOJ sued Georgia over discriminatory voting laws. His cash relief program cut black child poverty by 40%. And Juneteenth is now a federal holiday and first black woman to the Supreme Court. No good?
No. Look, he's doing it again. Let's go through these items again, one by one. DOJ banned the use of chokeholds by federal law enforcement. He's giving more money to the police. He's not defunding the police. He's giving more money to the police. Are all of those police departments no longer doing chokeholds? I beg to differ. Not based on the videos that I've seen recently. DOJ sued Georgia over discriminatory voting laws. But that's something that helps him. That's something that helps the Democratic Party. So you can go out and vote for them. Infrastructure plan, which I told you guys, that wasn't enough money. There needed to be more added into that. So we'll let that stay, but that wasn't enough. Cash relief program cut black child poverty by 40%. Guys, don't you remember last year they said we lift half of the kids out of poverty? And they were bragging about that. They're still bragging about this, by the way. What about the other half? What about the other half? Establish Juneteenth as a federal holiday. More identity politics, more virtue signaling. See, this is the liberal mindset. Let me tell Black people what Joe Biden has done for them. Let me remind them that he gave them Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Does making Juneteenth a federal holiday, does that fix the schools in Black neighborhoods? Does that stop police from shooting unarmed Black people? Does that stop police from targeting Black people in those neighborhoods? The next one, nominated first Black woman to the Supreme Court. More identity politics. What does that do to help Black people? And the last one, executive order to hold officers accountable for police misconduct. How? How are you holding them accountable? How are they being held accountable? I'm still seeing police videos come out every other day. I just saw a video about a week or two ago of a police officer tasing a pregnant Black woman on her belly. I don't see any accountability there. This is what liberals do, you guys. Do you see this? So you go ahead and you remove Juneteenth as a federal holiday, nominated the first Black woman to the Supreme Court, and the other two previously. 4 of these items that he mentioned are just virtue signals. That's it. That doesn't help Black people. The first Black woman to the Supreme Court, you know who that helps? That helps Joe Biden, and that helps the Black woman who went to the Supreme Court. That helps her. Let's go back into the video. One thing I will say as we get into this discussion right now, Cornel West is going to respond. And one thing I will say, I wish Cornel West would have pushed back on this. He didn't push back on this. He didn't call out the identity politics portion of these things listed, which I would have expected him to do, but he doesn't do that. Let's go back in.
No, those are wonderful, given
but why do you call him milquetoast then?
I mean, he's milquetoast because he still is tied to Wall Street. He's got crimes of foreign policy.
I know, but he's a politician.
Saudi Arabia is mistreating the Yemenites folk. The Israeli crimes against the Palestinians.
So do you notice here that once Cornel West mentions that Joe Biden is tied to Wall Street, Bill Maher jumps in, tries to cut him off. Every time you start to mention money, they try to cut you off. Jumps in to cut him off, and Bill Maher says, but he's a politician. You see how he can just shrug it off like that?
Palestinians he's not going to say a word about. And look, he's in town right now. We just had the People's Summit, as you know. I know. Right across from him, right?
Well, we had the Summit
of
the
Americas. What does he do with Latin America? We are on the cutting edge of human rights. We are USA in Latin America on the cutting edge of human rights with one.
Do your white guy impression again.
We are on the...
Oh, that's great.
No, but all the precious brothers and sisters in Latin America, we overthrowing democratic parties, we in friendly terms with dictators. Let's just be honest and candid, and most importantly, don't
let's be honest and candid and say we're living in the real.
Oh, shout out to Zeneb. Thanks for this. It wasn't available to everyone either. The moratorium only went on for 90 days. Exactly. Now, here's Bill Maher again making excuses for Joe Biden. Now he's making excuses for Joe Biden being funded by Wall Street.
World. Nobody gets everything. Nobody gets everything. It's like.
Do you hear this? Now, Cornel West is talking about how people are treated in Latin America. Listen to his response.
Cutting edge of human rights with one.
Do your white guy impression again.
We are on
Oh, that's great.
No, but all the precious brothers and sisters in Latin America, we overthrowing democratic parties, we in friendly terms with dictators. Let's just be honest and candid, and most importantly,
Yes, let's be honest and candid and say we're living in the real world.
We live in the real
nobody
world.
gets everything. Nobody.
We're living in the real world. No one gets everything. Cornel West is explaining to him what Joe Biden has done to people in the global South. How he's been treating people in other countries abroad. Bill Maher's response is, this is the real world. You can't get everything. And notice how he says it so casually. So I want to remind you, Bill Maher is wealthy. The reason why he can say that in such a casual tone, and this tends to be the liberal response, is because they're not American. He doesn't care about it because he's not affected. He's not directly affected. He's not impacted in any way because they're not in this country. And a lot of liberals, and people may not want to hear this, a lot of liberals really don't care about people in the global South. They really don't. If it's not happening in this country, they don't care about it. Bill Maher is presenting liberalism on full display. Full display. They're the ones that'll tell you that they agree with all these social issues, that people should have equal rights. But they'll still also tell you we need to keep it at arm's length away. They're the ones that'll tell you, not in my backyard. They'll tell you they agree on these things, but they don't want it next to them. That's Bill Maher. They'll say that we should be concerned about issues, but not to the point where you're asking people to fight and push back on it. Because liberals like the status quo. They like it just the way it is. They may have criticisms here and there. They may have disagreements here and there. But those disagreements will never push them to the point where they're willing to fight against it or push back on it. They're not willing to leave the comfort zone of the status quo. And Bill Maher is a perfect example of that. There's more said here.
He gets everything. It's like
But you gotta have some
you're such an
consistency,
absolutist.
Oh, I'm not at all.
But you are. I mean,
No,
okay, so
no, not
but
really.
you're like you mentioned, he's talking to Saudi Arabia. I agree.
You should reset the button.
Yes, of course.
They're committing crimes against the
it's a
president.
tremendous hypocrisy. He's a politician. That's what part of the gig is. Wait a second.
Did you hear that? He says that Joe Biden is a politician. That's what part of the gig is. You see the liberal mindset? Again, they're fine with the status quo. Yes, these things that you mentioned about Joe Biden, yes, those things he's doing, they're wrong. But he's a politician, and that's just how the game goes. They're fine with the status quo. They don't really want to, they're not revolutionary. They don't really want to push. They don't really want to fight for anything. They just want to be able to raise their hand and say that they didn't vote for the Republican Party. He goes on.
Let me just finish.
Okay.
Yes, he doesn't want to invite the people to the Avenue of the Americas.
You got New York City on your mind.
City, the summit of the Americas.
No harm in that. No harm in that. I live in Harlem.
Because he didn't invite Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela because they are led by dictators, which I agree is so silly because he's about to meet with Saudi Arabia because they have the gas.
And he's got a gangster from Brazil sitting with him, meeting in private.
But if you don't get the people gas, and the people have a lot of gas already. Yeah. If you don't get they're going to lose badly, but they're going to lose even worse.
Do you see how he comes in and runs cover for Joe Biden? These are the vote blue, no matter who people. Yes, you're right. What he did was wrong. This is wrong. He shouldn't be doing this. Yes, he's a hypocrite. There's a lot of hypocrisy, but vote for him anyway.
It's just going to elect a Republican. So this is the world that we live in. Yes. People do have to make compromises.
Listen to this one more time. He says, otherwise, you're going to have to elect a Republican. See, here comes the fear mongering. This is what they do.
And he's got a gangster from Brazil sitting with him, meeting in private.
But if you don't get the people gas, and the people have a lot of gas already. Yeah. If you don't get they're going to lose badly, but they're going to lose even worse. It's just going to elect a Republican. So
this is how they keep you in the Democratic Party. They're going to lose, but they're going to lose even worse. It's just going to get you a Republican elected. You see? You see how they pretend you can't do anything different? You see how they pretend you can't vote third party, you can't vote for independent? You never hear them say, get out in the streets. I know that much. You don't hear them say that. Because someone like Bill Maher is comfortable. He's financially set. This is why you can't look to them. When it comes to celebrities, you cannot look to them for any type of revolutionary jargon. You cannot count on them to really be ready for a fight, to push and to fight back. They're not about it. They're not about it. Listen to this.
This is the world that we live in. People do have to make compromises, even good.
This is the world that we live in. People do have to make compromises. But I have a question. Why is it that the people who are always having to make the compromise is the American people? It's the working class and poor people. When we make these compromises that Bill is referring to, the people who always lose are us. The politicians don't lose. They get reelected. They get more money. They get book deals. They get speaking engagements. They get to put their kids through college and not their kids have to worry to take out any student loans. So why is it this compromise that Bill Maher talks about? It seemed like to me, the people who are always on the losing end of that compromise are poor working class people. People like Bill Maher are not affected. There has to be a compromise. And the people who always end up sacrificing everything is us. This is the class divide. It's easy for someone like him who's wealthy to say that we have to make a compromise because he's not losing anything. You see what I mean? He's not losing no money. Is he having to worry about being unhoused? No. He's not losing any book deals. He's not losing his show. He doesn't have to worry about that. This is why I continue to point to the class issue.
People.
But there's a difference between, and you know, based on your wonderful Ivy League training at Cornell University.
One of the few colleges you have not taught at.
Right. Phronesis, practical wisdom is not opportunistic judgment. Just like pragmatism is not opportunism. If you make wise judgments relative to constraints, principles can be compromised, but the principles are still retained. Once you have very little principles, it's all about power, all about manipulation, all about spectacle, all about image. That's very much what American politics is about these days in both parties. Spectacle, superficial. And so when you say, well, if they're hypocrites, we got to allow for the hypocrisy. No, not at all, especially when you're blues men like you and I, because I know your sensibility in terms of how you wrestle with catastrophe. When you're a blues man or a blues woman, what does that mean? You're going to tell the truth with style and a smile no matter what the consequences are and walk off and say, I hope to do better, try again, fail better, like Samuel Beckett said.
Right. Okay.
All right, and I think that's the end of this clip. Let me see. Because I have another one.
Yeah, great.
Okay, and
yeah, that's the end of that clip. So I'm glad that Cornel West brought it back to the point that, listen, it's both parties. And for Bill Maher to say we need to allow the hypocrisy to continue because otherwise you end up with a Republican, that's not okay. That's not okay. They need to be called out. They need to be held accountable, period. Let's go to that other clip if we can, Eric, because there's another one where he's also talking to Bill Maher as well. And this is, again, he brings up the money. So listen to this.
black voters in South Carolina picked the guy who could win.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
And he's a terrible president.
But the sad thing was,
It's not a terrible president.
for the first time in American history, the most progressive voting bloc of black people did not vote for the most progressive candidate, who was Brother Bernie Sanders.
Right.
That's very important to keep in mind.
Right.
Because Bernie.
So I'm glad that Cornel West said that too. So he's letting you know there was a time when, as black voters, we would vote for the more progressive candidate. Bernie Sanders was the more progressive candidate. Now, I have a lot of criticism of Bernie Sanders today, but he was the progressive candidate. And the majority of African Americans voted for Joe Biden. Now, there's a lot that goes along with that. There's the media smears of Bernie Sanders. There's the endorsement from Jim Clyburn. I went to college in South Carolina. Jim Clyburn is actually very influential in South Carolina for some god awful, who knows why reason. So there's a lot of things that went into that. Obama jumped in, made calls, told people to drop out of the race. There's more that goes into it. But I think a big part of this, a big piece of this, has to deal with the fact of how, as African Americans, we have kind of been brainwashed by neoliberalism. A community of people going from revolutionary leaders and thinkers and fighters to going into neoliberalism. That's what really changed, in my opinion. Now they're going to go on here.
Bernie was much more tied to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. than Brother Joe Biden was.
Oh, for sure.
But the black leadership, with Clyburn and others, tied to the pharmaceutical company, so he can't go for Medicare for all. No, he's tied to big money, like most of these milquetoast politicians.
So I want to jump in here, and he says the black leadership were the ones that told black people to vote for Joe Biden. And that's how it goes. Now, Jim Clyburn says that he's progressive. Why are you telling people to vote against the candidate that wants to give everybody health care? If you say you're progressive, why are you telling people to vote against the progressive candidate? Because Jim Clyburn takes a lot of money from Big Pharma. I think he takes the most money from Big Pharma from anyone in Congress. I think he takes the most. I have to double check on that. But at last I checked, he was taking the most of that. You have people like Nancy Pelosi, who obviously is not going to approve something like Medicare for all or something like universal health care in this country, because she's also backed by Blue Cross Blue Shield. So is Joe Biden. So this is important for people to know, because this is what tends to happen. People tend to follow the black leadership, whether that is Jim Clyburn, whether that's Reverend Al Sharpton, whoever they want it to be today, whether it's Maxine Waters. That's what typically tends to happen. So you had black leadership turning against black people because they want to satisfy donors, corporations, and Wall Street. Let me say that again. You have black leaders turning against the black community because they want to serve their donors, Wall Street, and corporations. They do not really want to help the people in the community and even in the districts that they supposedly represent. Because if that were the case, someone like Jim Clyburn would not have one of the poorest districts in South Carolina. He's been in office all those years. What has he really done for his own damn community? Not much. Not much. Let's go back in.
The big money. So you got Bernie out there laying out his vision, and we were winning in November. You remember?
What do you mean that's the first time? You had in 2016, you had the black voters lining up strongly behind Hillary Clinton over Bernie. And in 2008, you had them behind Obama, who was not as far left as John Edwards. Right. I think that I think it's a long tradition of pragmatism.
And now they're going for Rick Russo.
Or we can say pragmatism or
Well, wait a minute here. Let's go back to what Mustache Man is saying. That is a wicked mustache. I don't know what's happening there.
The first time. You had in 2016, you had the black voters lining up strongly behind Hillary Clinton over Bernie. And in 2008, you had them behind Obama, who was not as far left as John Edwards. Right. I think that.
But I think we all know black people voted for Obama because we wanted to have a black president. I was guilty of that as well. I fell for the identity politics. This is, I mean, come on, man. Let's be real. Let's be real.
I think it's a long tradition of pragmatism among black voters.
We can say pragmatism or unshaded perception.
And in surveys now, you get white liberals having moved to the left
but the difference was that
black liberals.
This last election, though, brother, when we were winning in Nevada, in that sense, we could have had a major push for black voters for Bernie. Where the first time he ran, it was an interesting kind of project. They didn't think that he really had a chance. And I mean, I supported Obama in 2008. Maybe at 4%, and the black folk were not voting for him.
But maybe
early on, they shifted later.
Maybe people just are not that in love with socialism.
Okay, hold on. Let me respond to something. I said answer. Let me respond to something Cornel West said here. And then I'm going to get to that socialism comment by Bill Maher.
Obama in 2008, maybe at 4%, and the black folk were not.
Got to go back a little bit further. Okay.
Liberals having moved to the left.
But the difference was that
black liberals.
This last election, though, brother, when we were winning in Nevada, in that sense, we could have had a major push for black voters for Bernie. Where the first time he ran, it was an interesting.
Okay, this part right here, I wish Cornel West would have mentioned this part. When he says that they were winning in Nevada, and they were, he said we could have had a push for black voters to come over and vote for Bernie Sanders. I wish Cornel West would mention, but why did that not happen? I wish he would call out the fact that, and he may have done this before, but I'm saying in this interview in particular, I wish he would have called out the fact that because Obama made calls, it's okay, call him out. Because Obama picked up the phone, told Pete to drop out, told Amy to drop out, told Beto to drop out, let Elizabeth Warren stay in on Super Tuesday to divide the progressive vote between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. And there were some people who switched from Bernie to Elizabeth Warren just because they wanted the progressive woman instead of the progressive man. Like, call it all out. Like, mention it. Like, why you were winning in Nevada. What happened? Whose hands were at the table? Who was playing the game? How did they win? What did they do? It's like you had Bernie Sanders sitting at a poker game, sitting at the table, and all the players had tricks up their sleeves. Call it out. I wish he would have called that out.
Kind of project. They didn't think that he really had a chance. And I mean, I supported Obama in 2008. Maybe at 4%, and the black folk were not voting for him.
But maybe
early on, they shifted later.
Maybe people just are not that in love with socialism.
No, it's not socialism.
Well, Bernie is a socialist.
He's a New Deal, new liberal.
Okay, listen to this part one more time. Because I'm tired of this talking point, and I'm about to debunk this talking point by Bill Maher.
They shifted later.
Maybe people just are not that in love with socialism.
No, it's not socialism.
Well, Bernie is a socialist.
He's a New Deal, new liberal.
He likes to call himself a socialist.
Let's talk about this because this is part of the problem. Bill Maher says maybe people just aren't that into socialism. And I need to explain here. Eric, let's drop this video really quick. And go to the article. I need to explain something really quick. Two things. There is a difference between social programs and socialism. They're not the same thing. One of the problems was that Bernie Sanders kept calling himself a socialist. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. And you can put me on record to say that. I don't care. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. Cornel West just explained to you, he's a New Deal neoliberal. But you had someone like Bernie Sanders saying that he is a socialist, and he's not. By definition, he's not. When you talk about things like universal health care, a social program and socialism are two different things. If you look at all the countries that have universal health care, they're not socialist countries. Let's pull this up because we need to talk about this because I want people to stop saying Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Here we go. Social programs versus socialism. They're not the same, peeps. Whoops. I think I made this too big. All right. Let's scroll down here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I do want to say this part right here. We must stop confusing social programs and socialism. These terms are a little bit similar, but in reality, both of these are two different categories of subjects. The social programs are entirely open, hands-on with every category of people present in the society. This is the reason you must know the social programs versus socialism to know the difference between the two. So let's go down here. What is socialism? And by the way, I think I'm gonna do a stream on this one day, explaining all different types of socialism and the differences between them, and democratic socialism too, because let me get into that in a second. Socialism has a deep-rooted meaning. Socialism is a form of economic production where the workers are receiving the maximum of the facility. They are dividing the profit among the co-workers based on their performances. Socialism is denoting the public ownership of productions. On the other hand, the social programs invite everyone to their scheduled program and are not thinking about making some profit out of these programs. Socialism is different from social programs. Here, most production houses like factories, land, are all controlled by the public. This is the significant difference with a capitalist society. Let me go down here. There's one more part. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there's one more part here. This part about Social Security. The government is providing Social Security, but for the service provided, they are going to hire some company to provide the service to the citizens. Then again, we are talking about Social Security. Corporate companies are getting the maximum priority. So I do want people to understand they're not the same thing. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist, and I know he calls himself that. If I really wanted to go kind of far with it, I would say he's a democratic socialist at best. And Democrat socialists also are not socialists. Democrat socialists, they still believe that capitalism can be reformed. They believe that you can put guardrails on capitalism. Socialists don't believe that. Socialists believe that capitalism is the problem, that capitalism has to go. And in a true socialist society, workers would own the means of production. We would own a piece of our work, which we do not. And there was nothing on Bernie Sanders' platform that was pushing for that. We'll go deeper into this another day. We'll go deeper into it. But I'm going to go back to the video. I'm going to do a whole separate stream on that, you guys, because I really want to break that down. There's a lot that goes into it. But that was part of the problem, that Bernie Sanders kept calling himself a socialist, and by definition, he's not. So here we go. Boop. Let me scroll down here, and here we go.
A lot of people like to call themselves things. But why would you socialist project? Why would you want to call yourself? Why would you want to call yourself a term that doesn't have a positive connotation? Because he's in love with Eugene Debs.
Do you hear what Bill Maher just said? Why would you want to call yourself a term that doesn't have a positive meaning? Doesn't have a positive meaning to who? Do you see what I mean? Do you see the liberal mindset?
And he's in love with Norman Thomas. And okay, but people don't know who Eugene Debs is. And if they did, he wouldn't be popular. Man, you got to teach people who they are.
Socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a Democratic congressman in Oregon who was backed by Biden, and the more socialist candidate won.
We have polling on this. I mean,
did you just hear that? Did you hear what she just said? Let me go back.
Be popular. Man, you got to teach people who they are.
Socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a Democratic congressman in Oregon who was backed by Biden, and the more socialist candidate won.
We have polling.
The more socialist candidate won.
On this, I mean, the white liberal is to the left of the average Democratic black voter.
No question.
And that's what this is about for him. That's what this is about for Bill Maher. What's acceptable to the white liberal? Listen to this again. He's revealing himself. Let it all out.
But people don't know who Eugene Debs is.
And I would argue against that too. Some people do know who Eugene Debs is. Bill Maher doesn't know who Eugene Debs is. That's why he's saying that.
And if they did, he wouldn't be popular.
Man, you got to teach
I
people
think
who
he
they
owns
are.
his socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a guy, a Democratic congressman in Oregon who was backed by Biden, and the more socialist candidate won.
We have polling on this. I mean, the white liberal is to the left of the average Democratic black voter.
No question.
And that's the measurement that he's using. See how this works? What is acceptable to the white liberal? That's the model he's going to go by. That's what he's going to use.
Right?
Every time.
On social issues and on economic issues.
Education.
Right. Yes. Most black voters.
Why is he asking Kellyanne Conway about what most black voters want? Do you guys, anybody notice this? You got Cornel West sitting right next to you, and you're asking about what black voters want. Why are you asking Kellyanne Conway instead of Cornel West? Watch this again.
I think he owns his socialist views, though. I think he's very proud of that, frankly. And he just primaried a guy, a Democrat.
Polling on this. I mean, the white liberal is to the left of the average Democratic black voter.
No question.
Right?
Every time.
On social issues and on economic issues.
Education.
On social issues and economic issues, right, Kelly? Let me get that nod and that approval from you.
Right. Yes. Most black voters are moderate, not liberal. More white Democrats
take
are
the Poor People's
liberal.
Campaign with William Barber and Thea Harris. We're going to be there
sometimes
next week with him. The black community is very supportive of William Barber and company with the Poor People's Campaign.
Okay.
Just as, or even more than the white brothers.
Why is Joe Biden losing their support right now, though, according to lots of polls and articles?
Inflation. Fucking gas.
Inflation.
I gotta go.
I don't even know what to say after that. I don't even know what to say. But it was really weird to me how he looked towards Kellyanne Conway for the confirmation about black voters instead of asking Cornel West that question. I don't know. But the point from that conversation, I'm glad Cornel West brought it back to the money, how the both parties are corrupt. It's a problem. They're connected to Wall Street. All of those issues came up. I do wish that he would have pushed back more about the items that popped up about identity politics and the virtue signaling that Bill Maher was trying to do. I wish he would have pushed back against that. And I also wish that he would have just called it out. Like, what happened? Why were they not winning after Nevada? I wish he would have just called out Obama and all the trickery that went on within the DNC. I mean, at this point, we really ain't got much to lose. Just go ahead and call it out. I think I have some comments I need to go to. But before I go to those comments, I don't think I announced this yet. Tomorrow night, Jimmy Dore will be here and Matthew Ho will be here. So tomorrow night should be a fun, eventful night. Definitely tune in tomorrow night for that. Should be awesome. All right, where did I leave off? Oh, Andrew, thank you for the super chat. Bill Maher, we gave you $2 and a cheeseburger with no cheese. That's got to be good for the black community. Oh, that's a good analogy. That's a good analogy. I like that, Andrew. Thank you for this super chat as well. Snoop, no, not the billionaire, Snoopy. Yeah, for those who missed that part of the discussion, Snoop did endorse Caruso for LA mayor. Thank you for this super chat as well, Andrew. I like Dr. West, but I wish he didn't call them Brother Trump and Brother Biden. They ain't brothers of mine, and neither is Bill, not anymore. Ouch. Lawrence says Biden appointed a cabinet filling the primary positions with bloodthirsty warmongering gals and turned to U.S. foreign policy over to these gals or ghouls. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. American liberals typically are high on their perch, liking to point out bad things, but not being firebrandish about the necessities to deal with them. 100%. Thank you for the super chat, Colin. Can't talk about education is improving when teachers are quitting in droves. Bingo. Bingo. Some of my friends that are teachers are also quitting now too. In fact, a friend of mine told me last week, she said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. She said, too much bureaucracy. And she's right. Thank you for the super chat, game.film. Keep up the great work, Sabs. Thank you so much. Thank you for the super chat, Deep Space Hippie. Can you cover Bernie's hearing on Social Security? I can look into that and possibly. Just got to see what I got planned for the rest of the week. I got a lot of guests this week, actually. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. This is for whoop-de-fun-do, indeed. LOL. Delthea Simmons said, first, Bill Maher says the Dems are doing great things. And then when he's called on his bullshit, he says, well, we have to live in the real world. And he does this every time. Yep. Because he's not affected. Thank you for the super chat, Carl. None of them want to stop the DC gravy train. This is true. TJ, if anyone watching is in South Carolina, please vote for Marcel Dixon tomorrow in the primary. Send Jim good for nothing Clyburn home. There you go, guys. Delthea said Bernie supports the welfare state. The welfare state is liberalism's answer to the problem of poverty without getting rid of capitalism or its hierarchy. Correct. Thank you for the super chat, Ashura. So K and K were wrong, Bernie. He's no socialist. By definition, he's not. Again, I'm gonna do a show on that one day, like just a whole show about breaking down different types of socialism. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Democratic socialists are 100% socialists who are against capitalism. Bernie Sanders is a social democrat who misidentifies as a Dem socialist. That's interesting because that's not what I saw on DSA's organization. So that's interesting. Thank you so much for that. I'll go ahead and take those Rockfin comments. Thank you for the comments on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. The tip on Rockfin. Biting other people's stuff, then putting it out as their own reminds me of what hip-hop producers like legendary Marley Marl was rumored to do with people's beats who were nobodies trying to come up in the 80s. Matter of fact, it is a common practice in the music industry, probably other industries also. Sabs, I ask you like I asked Kit, make this clip and send out so I can send. I know people who know Chuck. Oh, thank you for this tip as well. Love Bill, but much rather nationalize these companies along with broadband infrastructure, energy in any form, healthcare, pharma, weapons of war manufacturing, and prisons to reform profit incentive of sending people to prison and to war. Thank you for this tip, Dave. Hey, Sabs, did you know that there is a large Amazon boycott going on in New England? Just dropping that. Not a widespread thing organized, but many bookstores separated completely the past while. Yes, we need website matching too. Net neutrality was very important. True. Ron, 100% there. I did not know about that. Thank you for letting me know, Dave. Thank you for this tip as well, Roger. What would have been AOC's answer if we didn't have political parties? Trick question. There would have not been an answer because no parties bash probably wouldn't have asked the question. She was asked about New York State Senator Biaggi. Biaggi, clear example of why progressive Dems do better at the state level than the federal level. She was great as a state lawmaker. She went up against Cuomo, like what we like to see federally. She and other progressive state lawmakers got yelled on by Cuomo for killing his Amazon Tech Center deal that AOC took credit for, but in reality, unions and state lawmakers who killed it. Now that Biaggi is running for Congress, she instantaneously switched from progressive to run-of-the-mill Democrat. Look what Dems do to progressives. Without parties, then no more empty partisan loyalty of getting behind people who are egregious. And you absolutely abhor, but forced to back because leadership requires it. Where if you don't, then your ascendancy within the party remains stunted. No more politicians taking credit for things the same party president did. They have to earn their vote, and voters would have to do the work of researching politicians on where they are on the issues instead of just choosing a damn alphabet. You want to see more accurate poll to see how voters feel about issues around the country? Well, then allow the only poll that matters. Allow voters of all states to pass laws and amendments via ballot initiatives. Also, I don't think, Sab, that celebrities have that much power over people who don't pay attention to politics to influence them to vote for who they say to vote for. Maybe before, but those days have passed. Sab, you can't blame white liberals with focusing on identity politics when it was older Black leaders who hail from the civil rights era, Jesse, Al, NAACP, and others who've been pushing identity politics since I've been alive. They trained Dems well on IDP simply because there was an assumption that once they were in power, they'll help us. They'll help us. Might have been true once, but not now. Just because you look like me don't mean you look out for me. Biden let millions of people go homeless as the moratorium expired last August, despite being warned by Justice Kavanaugh that they will extend it this one last time. But once it expires in August, it's out of our hands. Congress has to do something about it. He kicked millions of people off unemployment on Labor Day, still waiting on those 2,000 checks he promised. The child tax credit, not made permanent, expiring in an election year. He put economic sanctions on imported Russian oil and pissed the Saudis off. And now we're paying over $100 a week for gas. The bipartisan bill that passed had in it asset recycling, which would lead to private equity privatizing our infrastructure. American Rescue Plan got negotiated down by so much that it won't really do anything, yet gave $40 billion of our money to Ukraine when people are suffering here. Zelensky got our money, and now he's set to lose anyway. Money down the drain that could have went to us. No reversal of the Trump tax cuts for the rich, corporations and Wall Street, as well as further tax hikes on them, despite they needed their taxes raised even before Trump tax cuts. No reeling corporations in on their price gouging as they are raising prices above inflation rate. Was quick to send Haitians seeking refuge here back to Haiti, but let Azov battalion, aka Nazi sympathetic Ukrainians in the country. After saying he owes his victory to Black people, he's done absolutely nothing for Black Americans. He couldn't even get the $2,000 checks he promised to Black people of Atlanta if they elected Warnock and Ossoff. He increased police funding, still didn't enter us back into the Iranian deal. No executive order on Medicare for all, then allow Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices, relieve student loan debt, take weed off Schedule 1 list. He can recall all military grade weapons from the police debts around the country. Reinstate a rule that would require corporations to disclose their spending on union busting activities. Fix Flint H2O. By the way, when I said I love Bill in first message, you read that was sent when Ron was talking about his bill. Please don't think I love Bill Maher. Oh, I had no idea you were about to bring Bill Maher on. No love for that bill, only the bill Ron was talking about. Okay, thanks for the clarification there, Roger. Thanks. That's good to know. That's good to know. Thank you for this super chat, AJF. Martin liberal mantra. Go along, get along. Don't rock my boat. Rock the boat. Rock the boat. Angel said, Sabby, you are really doing great. Hope soon you get to 25K, 50K, and 50K, and so on subscribers. Always the best. Thank you so much, Angel. Thank you for the super sticker, Kyle Woolley. Sherry says, Professor Richard Wolff did a series on different meanings for socialism at Democracy at Work. I'll check that out. Thanks so much, Sherry. Yeah, we got to break that down. We got to break that down. All right, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so, please hit that like button. It helps me with the algorithm. Come back and see me tomorrow. Jimmy Dore will be here. Matthew Ho will be here. It's going to be a fun show. I hope you learn a lot. So come back, guys. I am going to head out. It's 9 o'clock, past my time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, guys. Follow me on Rockfin, Rumble. If you're not doing that, I'm also on Odyssey. Same name, same bat channel, same bat time. And you can subscribe to my newsletter. That's pinned at the top of the chat. So you'll get a notification, an alert every time I go live, regardless if you get the one from YouTube or not. So check that out, guys. So have a good night. Keep up the fight.